let's have a discussion today on what a role of R&D, what R&D roles are, and then as my role as head of R&D in Biocon for almost 5 years, what were my experiences and how did we sort of navigate that space, and that's sort of what I'll talk about today. So let me share my slides. I made a few slides for discussion. So what I'll do is I'll have to show you some background, and from that we can do a Q&A later on, which will be more informative. So I made a few slides. I mean, there are 44 slides. I'm not going to show you all of these here, but I'll just okay. So what I thought I'd talk about is an R&D function in a pharma or biotech company. So the topics I want to talk about are how to develop a plan, what are different kinds of organizational structures, what are the core functions, some samples of organization structures, and maybe if we have time, then we'll talk about responsibilities and some case studies and all that. But maybe we won't get to that. Okay, many of you know me, but just to give you a perspective of when I joined Biocon, what was my experience till then, right? So I had about 30 years of experience by then, working almost equally, 10 years after finishing my PhD, 10 years in academia, Cornell and UPenn, and then about 10 years at Merck and in vaccines, and 10 years in biologics in Amgen. So about 30 years of experience by then, and then I made a decision to sort of try something different and took a risk and came to India and tried to see what I could do. And through many opportunities, I had an opportunity to head R&D. So we've talked about this topic in one of the previous sessions, where scientific excellence is really important as we grow our own careers. And the topics of scientific excellence include things like the ability to have strategic vision, manage complicated time-sensitive studies, internal eminence, external eminence. I mean, this topic we've talked in detail in the past, so I'm not going to dwell on this. The reason I put this slide here, because for myself, I felt in the stage of my career, I was enough experience now that I had got a lot of these skills under my belt, so to speak, right? After 30 years or so. So then I joined Biocon, 2015. And when I joined Biocon, you just put it in context, I'm an immunologist. Everyone knows that I introduce myself like this, right? I'm an immunologist. I have 30 years of experience in biologics and vaccines, and I play the flute. But I'm an immunologist. But here I've been given a role for heading R&D, which contains all the functions, right? So I had never been head of R&D before that, and so just everything that I was looking at was as if I was drinking from a fire hose, right? And not even like this. It was actually like this. It was actually coming. Everything every day was new to me. Something was coming to me every day. So these are just typical slides that I thought like it will be useful not only for what I was doing at that time, but also maybe useful for everyone to think about how to plan when you start something new, or even when you're in the middle of something, you can start something. So first of all, for me, what I needed to do is I needed to identify a core team who I could work with, who can execute on a plan that we want to try to develop. So before developing the plan, you collect the data, you organize it and prioritize it and categorize it. Then you develop the plan by making sub-teams and identifying goals, measuring success is very important. How do you measure that you're actually going forward? Then you execute on the plan. This requires talking to a lot of people, identifying skills of leadership. I mean, among 20,000 people, you have to identify who is going to be in your core team, and you have to do it intuitively, right? Organization skills, decision-making skills, you have to have all of these skills to develop this plan. So after collecting a lot of amount of data, literally we did it in the context of a Excel spreadsheet. We collected every feedback from lots of different people, made 5,000 line items of things that we collected from a lot of conversations. And then finally, with a lot of help from a lot of my friends who are in strategy business in pharmaceutical companies, and try to parse this out, and came up with these 4 categories, which are called enable, business, talent, and culture. And you'll see that this is a process that I like to use for myself even now, that everything I do falls into sort of these 4 buckets. I was doing it even before, but probably in an unstructured, unplanned way. But now I'm doing it in a much more planned way. Enable is everything sort of work related. Everything that is work related, meaning all projects, all the methods, all the different groups that are working on different functions, from R&D, from process development to clinical trials to intellectual property. Everybody has their own work list, right? So that is one. How do you collect all of that? The second is business, which is at the bottom. Everything requires money, right? So there have to be budgets. You have to monitor the money. You have to have short-term and long-term plans. So everything money related. So among those 5,000 list thing that we made, we now categorized it into these 4 things. The third thing was talent, which is all the people and their training and what their experiences were. And were they matched? Were actually people with the right training doing the right job? Sometimes you just get the job that you get. You don't necessarily have the right training for it. And then finally, the culture, which is very, very important. The soft skills, how do you build teams, collaboration, innovation, all of these came into the picture. So we did all of this activity, and we actually made a proper R&D strategy to work around these 4 elements. And now we built teams, sub-teams, to manage each of these 4 elements, right? So we have a core team, then we have a sub-team to develop the plan. This is not organizational structure yet. This is just building the strategy. And then I won't go through the details of this, but essentially then you have the plan, and then you build an execution strategy, right? So you enable the portfolio, visualize the R&D, and then finally do the execution. Ultimately, it comes down to building an organizational structure. So nobody can do their work themselves. A typical organizational structure of a company will look like they have a head, they have various functions, and then you have all these cross functions which you have to interact with. You will probably experience this in your own companies that you're working on. There will be a head, maybe it's a head of a department or a head of a company, and there'll be a lot of functions within the company or the department, and you'll have to work with different functions. So you'll have to think about all of the people and how they're organized as you interact with them. There's a little bit more detail about the organizational structure. At the CEO level, you have different departments. You have the R&D department, manufacturing, finance, marketing, and you have all the cross-functional departments like regulatory, program management, intellectual property, business development, all of these, right? And you're interacting with everyone on a day-to-day basis. So now that you have a plan of what your organizational structure is going to look like, you have a head, and then you have all of these people that are matched to the organization. It is now monitoring what is happening. And then, the case study I will talk about is later on is adapting to change. So then you monitor, you see what's happening, and then you continue to evolve your organizational structure. So then in about 2 to 3 years, about 2007 to 2017 or 2018, in that time frame, and Partha and Abhishek and all were part of the team at that time, we got our first approvals from the US FDA. I think it was trastuzumab, biosimilar, which got approved. And then we started getting a spate of regulatory approvals. And regulatory approvals means, more staff is hired, the expansion of therapeutic areas from oncology. I've started working on diabetes and on neuromuscular diseases, and all kinds of other indications are increasing. Technologies, for those of you who are working on mass spec, you know this, every year we used to go and, a new mass spec technology would come, and then you'd have to adapt to that. You need people to run them and all that. Academic collaborations, the regulations were evolving, and the macro environment was changing. Both within the India space and also globally, a lot of things were changing all the time. And so the question is, how do you adapt to this change? Is your organizational structure adapting to where it needs to be? So I'm going to talk about the change a little bit later. Let me pause here and stop the slides here and see, because the change has a different case study story that I'm going to tell you. let's discuss what I've discussed so far based on the question that you have, and then we'll talk about the change. Any thoughts about what I've said so far? Anything that clicks in your mind?
One question is like how hard it was for you to transit from like US job to Indian like biopharma
Scenario.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. I think first of all, a couple of things that made it easier. One is I was staying with my family at home, so I didn't have to worry about all the things that I needed to do at home. So home was taken care of. Um, so I could put a lot of attention at work, and so I could focus on work. So that transition was not difficult when I was there. The second was I had been visiting quite often, and so I was used to the culture of the country in general, not in detail, but in general. So I knew the language, etc., etc. What was not in control is, or not in, I won't say not in control, yeah, is the diversity of work that was happening in the company, right? There were a lot of different things that are happening. And before this job, I was never head of R&D. I was head of a department, let's say immunology, right? But I was not like clinical team. I was not responsible for clinical. I'd worked with clinical partners before, but they were not reporting it to me. Now, I'm responsible for that department. So understanding all the other departments was good. One thing actually helped, which is part of that scientific eminence story that I'm telling you for your own careers as you develop your own careers. Of course, this is all retrospective learning. Is become an expert at something, right? So by that time I had focused so much that I was an expert on immunology and immunogenicity of biologics and vaccines. So that I knew at the back of my hand, right? So of course I have to keep up with it, but for the most part I knew most of what that needed to be. So I didn't have to worry about that, and I was confident about what I knew. Now I can go and learn other things. So that's sort of where I was when I started, Virender. I don't know if that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's something like many of us miss because many of us jump on multiple things at start rather than, I think, becoming expert on one thing and then building on that.
Yeah, I think that's sort of one of the lessons that I feel has been important for me in my career, retrospectively speaking.
Yeah.
While you're thinking, let me show you one slide that was going to show you later, but I might as well show you now because we are talking about it. This is a complex organizational structure that I hand drew, but let me zoom in on this. You can see the two inverted triangles, right? One straight triangle and one inverted triangle. You can see that, right? And you can see level 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. The way I think about training and how do you become an expert in one thing and then continue to learn new things in your career. So in the training program, think about somebody who's a fresh, like let's say master's level person, or let's say PhD level person, whatever, entry level person in a pharmaceutical company, right? In a pharmaceutical biotech company. Let's say you start at level 7, the lowest level, which is you're an analyst in the group. And so if you think about this lower triangle, majority of the time in your life, in your career, maybe the next couple of 3 4 years, whatever that initial period is, you are 100% of the time at the base of the triangle. You're learning. Let's say you're doing mass spec analysis or analytical studies on protein engineering or something, whatever that technology that you're learning is. 100% of the time, almost 100% of the time, you're doing that. You have no time to look at something else. The inverted triangle is something else, something different, right? Maybe related, maybe unrelated. As you get promoted to the next level in the company, now you have people who are working for you probably who are doing the lower parts of the job, and you are now responsible not only for the technical aspects, which of course the reduction of the triangle doesn't mean that you know less. It is just that you have to spend less time, or you have less time to do the more basic stuff, right? Now you have more time to do the other stuff, or you find time, you have to make time to do the other stuff, like maybe regulatory, maybe quality, maybe maybe marketing, maybe something related or unrelated. And as you can see, as you move up the ladder, you get less and less time to spend in your core functional area, and you have to spend more and more time as you go to the other areas. So what we don't, I won't generalize. I'll just say this for myself is what actually what I did was because I didn't plan it systematically, and I'm telling you the story retrospectively. What I could have done and I should have done is when I did immunology, when I was, after my PhD, I should have stayed in immunology for much longer. But in the other hand, I should have also learned some other things like pharmacology. Maybe I should have learned a little bit of manufacturing, process development. I didn't get that opportunity to learn all of these other things till much later in my life, right? So, but I think if you're planning your research career, it's good to think about this. You may not get the time to think, you may not get the time to do the other thing, but it's good to think about it. So let me pause here and see if there are any comments or questions on this.
I think one question is like transition from like bench work to leadership. So at least like I know in Indian scenario, everyone who joins company after 1 year, they think that they should move ahead, move up. So so how to plan it in a better way rather than just like pushing ones up by switching maybe companies or just switching departments.
Yeah, I mean, there no rule. Unfortunately, I'm going to say use the word unfortunately in society in general, not just in India, but all over the world, I think. Lab bench work is seen as sort of lower value, let's put it, and management role are seen as more value. Uh, we all know on this call that unless somebody does the lab work, nothing is moving forward, isn't it? So I think time culture of the company, the organization, and the macro culture has to change to give importance to the people who actually do the work. I mean, that will require huge culture change in the macro environment. So I guess we all have to adapt and adjust to the situation that we have.
To if we really want to grow now, we have to do a lot of bench work that is there. uh, no uh, no compromise or no alternative thing for that.
Correct.
But you know in a company or in a department, we have to be visible to the upper management also, in order to grow,
Yes.
and you have to put in that effort. And it's a very, it's like a knife's edge. You overdo and you cut yourself. uh,
Yeah.
we have to be smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a skill that is not easy to learn, right? And I don't even know whether you can learn it, but there has to be some intrinsic aspect to it. So we've talked about this topic in detail in the past, but anyway, since you brought it up, let me bring it up again. So in our own careers, how do we think about our own excellence, right? We are ultimately striving for excellence. How do you get there? And so let me talk more specifically about this internal eminence and external eminence. I mean, the story I like to tell is a very, and the analogy I like to tell is, हमारे office in our office building or घर के building में, right? Even if you're in your own building or office building, do people in the building even know you? Isn't it? First of all, in your lab, do people know you? If you have a big lab, let's say like 30, 40 people in the lab, whatever, do people know you? Can people tell that you are the person who's an expert on X or expert on Y? I mean, that is the internal eminence that you need to get, right? How do you do that? I think by volunteering for doing presentations. Like, for example, if there's a lab meeting, you go and present in the lab meeting or go and volunteer. Sometimes it's not comfortable, but you need to go and get out of your comfort zone and present. Um, or communicate to people. Go and talk to people from different levels, because I think that's something that I think is very underrated. At least I can tell you from my own experiences. Whenever I've tried to talk to people above my level in my career, I was pleasantly surprised that most people actually want to talk to you. When we are junior, we think, "Arey, that person is so senior, they may not have time, and who am I to go and talk to them?" But it is not true. Most of the other people will love to talk to the junior people. They are not going to take the initiative. You have to take the initiative. And then, whatever, some 80-20 rule, 80% of the people will say yes, but that 20% of the people will say no. But if they say no, doesn't mean you have to get disheartened. So that keeping that constant communication with the different groups is important. And listening more, listening a lot, rather than just telling people. So, and then finding that mentor. So this is all the thing of the internal eminence. You have to continuously do it. And as you get more senior and you get opportunities to go to conferences and meet people from outside the company, that's the time to gain your external eminence. And let me tell you a short story about my own experience in this eminence part. Not really eminence. It is more of management skills. So when I was at Merck, and also when I was at Amgen, I had an opportunity to be part of a non-profit organization which was promoting Hindustani classical music, first in Philadelphia, then in Los Angeles. And what happened was, this was a non-profit thing that I was doing. We were doing it on the weekends, and we were meeting people. And I was doing it with my friends from work, right? Some of them from different departments, who I would have never met had it not been for this activity that I was doing, right? I would have never met somebody from manufacturing, or never would have met an intellectual property lawyer, etc., etc. So we do these programs, and this actually happened, but this could also happen in the situations you are in. When we used to organize these concerts in the neighborhoods that we lived in, very, very senior people from the company came to listen to these concerts, right? And now you're standing on stage announcing the artists and talking to this famous artist, and your audience is the CEO of the company. You have never met the CEO of the company in your normal job, but here you have an opportunity to do that. So creating an environment for yourself where you can increase your network is your own responsibility. I know, long story, but this whole internal eminence, you have to take ownership of that. Yeah.
So not my manager's responsibility to promote me.
No.
I have to show the capability and enable him to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned this sort of phrase or anecdote or sentence from one of my friend long time ago when I was at Merck. It's a little funny, but it's real, and I'll just say it is. It may sound terrible, but in a company you have to make your boss look good. You have to do things so that your boss looks good.
Right.
You don't do it like you're sucking up, but do it in a proper way. But don't antagonize your boss unnecessarily unless you really strongly feel against something. In which case you should. There's always that balance. Which battle do I pick? But for the most part, 80-20 rule, the thing that you do ultimately, you will have a good impression on your manager, and your manager is the one who's going to go and promote you. I mean, not just promote, but talk good about you in the meeting that you're in, right? So your manager, your mentor are those people who are going to talk good things about you to other people when you are not there. That's the skill on how to enable that, right? But you have no power in that, but you have to keep trying. So I think what I wanted to cover today was mainly an R&D organization structure. I'm giving an R&D organization because it's my experience. But in your own careers, in your own lives, you are the head of R&D of your own self, so to speak, right? You have to create a plan for yourself on how to go forward. You have to collect the data, so to speak, all the things that you would want to do, and collect all the data that you want to do, analyze it systematically, prioritize it, make them into buckets, and find time to do all of those different things, which includes those 4 points that I told you. One is the science, which is the enabling of all the work that you do. So you should always understand how all the money is involved, so the budget and the business. The third is the talent, which is your own skills, your collaborative efforts, your communication skills, etc. And the fourth is the culture, as a personality, who are you and how are you going to interact with the world. All of those 4 things are a continuous thing that you constantly have to do for yourself. It's sort of what I applied to the bigger R&D structure goal also applies to at the individual level. What skills do you think are most critical for young scientists to build as they aspire to become leaders in the biopharma? So I think this is what I just told you. It is not one skill, right? You have to have a diversity of skills, and you have to figure out these for yourself. But I would generally put it in these 4 buckets that I told you about. You should have some skill in some aspect of it, but try to become sort of metaphorically the world's expert in something. So, maybe we'll talk about the next time when we talk about change control and how change is managed, and that requires a whole different topic. There's a topic which I read a lot about. First of all, I read a lot about organizational structures in general to see how different kinds of organization structures work. I also talked to a lot of my friends who are in strategy and have worked on organizational structures in companies. So I tried to gain all that information. And then it's a little bit of a skill, the ability to speak to different people in different ways is an evolved skill. It requires time. You need to be able to understand how to interact with people. It's a little bit of acting, a little bit of politics, a little bit of genuinity, and all of that combined, right? There's no simple thing to tell you, this is what I did to make that thing happen. But, and I used all the sort of materials I had in my repertoire to be able to do that, and music was one of them. And so that was a great way for me to connect to people who otherwise I would not have been able to connect to.
Naren, one mantra for all of us. Like, you are free flowing. You, I think, merge with anyone, any person. But how to be that? So,
I mean, I don't think I was like this in the beginning. I think it evolves with time. It evolves with time. I think you have to interact with more people, be a little bit, I will say, fearless, have a little courage to do things which is outside the box. And then, like I think we've spoken about this fear and courage thing, right? How do you build courage? And I talk about it from a neuroscience perspective, that the fear elements in the brain are regulated by the amygdala in the brain, which is, they're binary. You either have fear or you don't, the fight or flight response. But courage is a combination of multiple different parts in the brain, right? Multiple different organelles in the brain, multiple neurotransmitters are involved in improving courage. So courage, unlike fear, can be you can have little courage, and then you can have more and more and more courage over time. So do small courageous things in the beginning, and then you can get more courage to do bigger things. So that's sort of my statement for how to get there. Yeah, Nagesh.
Nagesh.
Yes. So I mean, I'll not just say think of you as a head of R&D, because I've seen you for like different roles. So that is what is interesting in the question is, how do you like feel that you should try writing a book now, or you should do research in immuno, or you should start a company? So these are some different areas altogether. But the question is it because of the people that you meet, or there is some other formula which leads you to try these different kind of things?
I think for me, it has turned out to be the people I meet. I get influenced by people I meet, positively and negatively. And I try to emulate what other people have done, like this entrepreneurship, right? For example, if it wasn't for my friend Ravi Khare, who had already taken the entrepreneurship journey in Pune for several decades, and when he asked me, would you be interested in starting something with me in the pharma business, it was great, right? Because then I didn't have to do a lot of risk taking and thinking about how to form the company myself. So Ravi helped me, helped me on with all the operational aspects of setting up the company. So the entrepreneurship journey sort of happened because I know Ravi, right? The other things, for example, like public speaking, for example, right? I probably wasn't very good at public speaking earlier, but the more and more I did it, you naturally become better. And that I learned from music, because I never played the flute well 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But now I play the flute well because I've been playing every day, and then every day a little bit compound interest, and you do little of that, and that improves. So there's a little bit of people and then making habits. And specifically for writing, you asked, about writing the book. That is, I know for sure. I mean, I've talked to a lot of writers now over the years, and it doesn't come overnight. You have to write something literally every day. And then one day it'll become a book.
Yes, sir. Sir, I want to ask, means like, if someone is like after PhD, he or she wants to join in a startup company, or he wants to create his own startup. So, what kind of technical as well as a commercial aspects they need to build in that one?
Good question. So let's talk about getting a job first. Joining a startup is different from starting your own startup. The skills that you require may be slightly different. For joining a startup, you need to find what your challenges, what your skills are going to be, where the match is. My 2 cents on that would be, startups require very specific kind of talent at a particular given time. And so you'll have to find which startup requires that particular talent. This is to get a job in a startup, or actually even in a company, big company. Also, same thing applies. For entrepreneurship, I think entrepreneurship is something completely different. You have to have a different kind of a mindset to start a company, I feel, especially early in life. Risk-taking ability is the highest. And that is not taught. I mean, somehow you have to have it. Or you have to see people doing it and then just take it. Because when an entrepreneur, it's not even about the technical skills, it's not about the business, it's not about anything. It's all of them combined. All the 4 things that I told you, the work, the business, the talent, and the culture, everything combined into one sort of has to be together. It's very difficult to explain. But risk-taking ability is the highest. Thank you so much for everyone for coming, because this session not only helps all of you, but learning from each other also helps a lot. The kind of questions that you ask and the way we all respond to each of these questions is very useful. So thank you for coming, and thank you, Virender, for organizing all of this so regularly.
No, I think it's all because of you. So.